Have you ever stopped to wonder if the very nourishment you carefully place on your table, the vibrant colors of nature you've been told are the essence of vitality, could be the silent architect of your heart's undoing? My name is Dr. Sanjay Gupta. I have spent 30 long, profound years navigating the sterile, white corridors of America's most demanding cardiac wards, and in that time, I have held the weathered hands of over 30,000 souls as they flickered between this life and the next. I have seen the sunrise through the windows of the intensive care unit more times than I can count, listening to the rhythmic, mechanical chirp of heart monitors that serve as the only soundtrack to a struggle for survival. But the most haunting sound I have ever encountered in my 3 decades of practice isn't the sudden wail of an emergency siren or the sharp gasp of a collapsing lung. No. The sound that keeps me awake at night is the deafening silence of a patient sitting in my exam room. A person who has lived with discipline, who has followed every rule of healthy living, yet finds their heart failing them in ways they cannot comprehend. I sit here today in my quiet office, surrounded by the heavy leather-bound journals of my predecessors and the digital ghosts of 30,000 medical charts, and I see a pattern that most of the world remains blind to. These charts are not just data points or clinical observations. They are the intimate biographies of mothers, fathers, and grandparents who believed they were doing everything right. We are raised in this beautiful country to believe that fruit is nature's perfect candy, a pure, unadulterated gift that can only bring healing to our bodies, especially as we enter our golden years. We see the bowl of fruit on the kitchen counter as a symbol of domestic peace and health. Yet as a physician who has witnessed the internal mechanics of the aging cardiovascular system, I must tell you that after you cross the threshold of 60 years, the biological contract between your body and your food undergoes a radical, invisible transformation. The rules of the game change without your permission, and the very kitchen you call your sanctuary can subtly become a place of hidden peril. I remember the weight of my stethoscope, a cold, silver instrument that has become an extension of my own ears, pressing against the chest of a man who couldn't understand why he felt like he was drowning on dry land. His heart was no longer dancing to the steady, reliable drumbeat of his youth. It was staggering, disrupted by a hidden chemistry that originated not in a laboratory, but in his own refrigerator. This is the tragic paradox of the aging heart. It becomes more delicate and more sophisticated at the exact same time, losing its margin for error while requiring even more precision to maintain its rhythm. Clinical research from institutions like Harvard and leading longevity centers in Japan has shown that after the age of 60, our metabolic pathways become less resilient, making us 85% more susceptible to food-drug interactions than we were in our 30s. Tonight, I am stepping out from behind the professional mask of a surgeon and a researcher to speak to you as a witness, a friend, and a fellow traveler on this road of life. This is not a dry medical lecture meant to fill your head with jargon. This is a deeply human journey into the living room of your health. I want to talk to you about the 5 familiar fruits that have likely been part of your life since childhood, the fruits you pack for picnics, the ones you slice for your grandchildren, the ones you blend into your morning smoothies with a sense of pride. But we must face the uncomfortable truth that for the heart of a person over 60, these fruits may no longer be the allies you think they are. They can interact with the essential medications that keep your blood flowing. They can strain the walls of your arteries until they lose their elasticity, and they can send a chaotic jolt through your heart's electrical grid. I have seen the look of utter betrayal in the eyes of a 75-year-old woman when I told her that her morning ritual was the reason her heart was skipping beats. It is a moment of profound vulnerability when a person realizes that the wisdom they've carried for half a century is now outdated by their own biology. I want to bridge that gap for you. I want to help you understand why your heart now lives with a smaller, more fragile boundary between health and crisis. This story is about more than just avoiding certain foods. It is about reclaiming the strength you still have by honoring the heart you carry today, not the one you had 40 years ago. We are going to explore the journey of healing, the reality of the death-life rebirth cycle that I see every day in my clinic, and how you can find a way back to a stable, joyful rhythm. As we walk through these 10 chapters together, I want you to feel the warmth of a doctor who truly understands the fear of a slowing pulse and the hope of a restored life. We will look at the stories of people just like you, people who faced the edge of the abyss and found their way back through the simple power of intentional choices. Your heart has served you faithfully for over 21,000 days, beating over 2.5 billion times without ever asking for a day off. It has carried the weight of your grief and the soaring heights of your joy. Now, in this season of your life, it is asking for something in return. It is asking for your awareness, your protection, and your willingness to listen to the silent truths it is trying to tell you. Let us begin this heart-to-heart conversation, for there is no greater medicine than the truth told with love. Arthur Miller sat across from me in my examination room, the gray light of a Portland morning filtering through the blinds and casting long, skeletal shadows across his weary face. At 78 years old, Arthur was a man built of coastal granite and library dust, a retired librarian who had spent his life cataloging the world's knowledge, yet he was utterly baffled by the betrayal of his own body. His hands, thin and translucent like parchment, trembled as they gripped the arms of the chair, and his eyes searched mine with a desperate, quiet terror. He spoke of dizzy spells that came out of nowhere, moments where the world would tilt on its axis, leaving him clutching the kitchen counter for dear life. To Arthur, these were the omens of an impending end, a sign that he wouldn't survive to walk his granddaughter down the aisle at her wedding next June. He had lived a life of meticulous discipline, especially after his first cholesterol scare a decade ago, and his morning ritual was his pride, a cup of black coffee and exactly 1/2 of a fresh grapefruit. I watched him as he described this ritual, seeing the conviction in his voice. He believed that the tart, bitter fruit was a shield, a natural warrior fighting the invisible demons of plaque and fat in his arteries. It broke my heart to be the one to tell him that this very shield was actually a Trojan horse. I leaned forward, my voice softening as I began to explain the complex, microscopic drama unfolding within his liver. "Arthur," I said, "medicine is a conversation between the substances we ingest and the enzymes nature gave us to manage them." I shared with him the groundbreaking research from Harvard Medical School regarding the furanocoumarine effect. These organic chemical compounds found in grapefruit are remarkably potent. They act as an irreversible inhibitor to a specific enzyme in the small intestine and liver known as CYP3A4. This enzyme is the primary gatekeeper for over 50% of all modern pharmaceuticals, including the very statins Arthur relied on to keep his cholesterol in check. When Arthur ate his grapefruit, those furanocoumarins were effectively switching off his body's ability to process his medication. Imagine a factory where the exit doors are suddenly welded shut, but the assembly line keeps running at full speed. Because the enzyme was blocked, the statins were not being broken down and excreted. Instead, they were backing up into his bloodstream, reaching concentrations 300% higher than what I had prescribed. He wasn't taking a standard dose anymore. He was accidentally overdosing every single morning. This toxic accumulation was causing subclinical rhabdomyolysis, a breakdown of muscle tissue, and in Arthur's case, it was attacking the most important muscle of all, his heart. The dizziness wasn't old age or a stroke. It was his blood pressure plummeting because his heart was too weak and poisoned by the excess medication to pump effectively. We looked at his lab results together, and I pointed to the silent spikes in his blood chemistry that mirrored the days he had been most diligent with his fruit intake. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He slumped back, his eyes filling with tears of both shock and relief. It wasn't his spirit failing, and it wasn't an inevitable slide into the grave. It was a biological misunderstanding. I told him that 90% of the damage could be reversed simply by changing his breakfast. A revelation that brought a flicker of hope back to his tired eyes. We talked about how the aging liver, already operating with 30% less blood flow than a younger one, simply cannot handle these chemical disruptions. This was the first step in our journey together, understanding that what we have been told is healthy for a 30-year-old can be a dangerous gamble for a man of 78. As he left, he held my hand with a grip that was already feeling a little more certain, a man no longer waiting for the end, but ready to change his story for the sake of a wedding in June. The human heart is an architectural marvel of bioelectricity, a pump that requires a perfect chemical environment to maintain its steady, life-giving cadence. When we talk about the interaction between certain fruits and cardiac health in the elderly, we are not merely discussing a mild stomach ache. We are describing a chemical storm that can dismantle the heart's rhythm in a matter of hours. As a physician who has seen the results of these interactions in thousands of clinical cases, I have observed that the aging body loses its metabolic elasticity. In our youth, our systems are forgiving, capable of absorbing shocks and clearing toxins with a vigor that we take for granted. But after the age of 60, that margin for error shrinks until it is as thin as a single layer of cells. A single glass of the wrong juice can suppress the body's defensive enzymes for up to 24 or even 48 hours, leaving the cardiovascular system completely exposed to the raw, unbuffered power of prescription drugs.
Science tells us that the heart's electrical grid is governed by delicate gates that allow minerals to flow in and out of cells. Many of the medications we prescribe for the elderly, calcium channel blockers for hypertension or antiarrhythmics for atrial fibrillation, are designed to sit on those gates and regulate that flow. However, when a fruit like grapefruit enters the system and shuts down the liver's processing plant, those medications flood the heart. Instead of a gentle regulation, the heart is subjected to a crushing weight of chemical signaling. The result is often a profound bradycardia, where the heart rate drops to 30 or 40 beats per minute, or a chaotic tachycardia that feels like a bird frantically beating its wings against the ribs. I have stood over hospital beds where patients were being prepped for emergency pacemakers, only to discover that their heart disease was actually a fruit-induced toxicity.
In a landmark study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, researchers found that the interaction between grapefruit and common blood pressure medications could cause a drop in systolic pressure of over 30 millimeters of mercury in older adults. For a 65-year-old, that is the difference between standing up safely and collapsing on the floor with a fractured hip. This is why I am so passionate about sharing this message. The danger is invisible, it is silent, and it is frequently misdiagnosed as the natural decline of the elderly. We see the fatigue, the shortness of breath, and the mental fog, and we assume the person is simply fading away. In reality, their internal chemistry is in a state of civil war. The heart, which should be a source of strength, becomes a source of anxiety, and the patient begins to withdraw from life, fearing the next spell of weakness. My goal in these halls of healing is to bridge the gap between the pharmacy and the kitchen, to ensure that the bridge you are crossing into your later years is built on solid ground. We must treat every substance that crosses our lips with the same respect we give to a potent drug, because at age 70, that is exactly what they are. Every choice matters now more than it ever did before. I want you to understand that by making a simple adjustment, by choosing a different fruit or a different time of day, you can calm the storm inside your chest and restore the quiet, powerful rhythm that nature intended. This is the essence of modern geriatric medicine. It is not just about adding years to life, but about protecting the quality of those years from the silent disruptions of our own habits. When we master the chemistry of our bodies, we regain the freedom to live without fear, knowing that our heart is no longer fighting a battle it was never meant to win. Dorothy Evans lived in a house that smelled of lavender and old books in the heart of Savannah, Georgia. At 82 years old, she was a woman of elegant stillness, a former school teacher who had spent decades shaping the minds of children, but since her husband passed away 3 years ago, her world had become very quiet. Loneliness has a way of leaching the color out of life, and for Dorothy, it had stolen her appetite. She found it difficult to cook for one, so she turned to what she called comfort foods, soft, easy things that didn't remind her of the empty chair at the dining table. Her go-to was a banana, often 2 or 3 a day, because they were good for the heart and gentle on her stomach. She sat in my clinic with a look of profound exhaustion, her skin pale and her voice a mere whisper. She told me she felt a heaviness in her chest, a strange, dragging sensation that made it feel as though her heart were made of lead. What Dorothy didn't realize was that her kidneys, though functioning well for her age, were only at about 55% of their youthful capacity, a condition known as stage 3 chronic kidney disease, which is incredibly common among those over 80. Potassium is a vital mineral. It is the spark that tells the heart muscle when to contract and when to relax. But there is a very narrow window of safety. In a healthy young person, the kidneys act like a high-speed drain, flushing out any excess potassium within minutes. In Dorothy, that drain was partially clogged. As she ate her bananas day after day, the potassium levels in her blood began to climb, a condition we call hyperkalemia. This mineral was slowly accumulating in the extracellular fluid around her heart cells, acting like a thick, invisible blanket that muffled the electrical signals required for a steady beat. On her electrocardiogram, I saw the telltale signs, the tented T waves that looked like sharp mountain peaks, warning me that her heart was on the verge of a total electrical standstill. Dorothy's heart wasn't failing because it was old. It was failing because it was drowning in too much of a good thing. To make matters worse, she was taking a common blood pressure medication, an ACE inhibitor, which also tells the kidneys to hold on to potassium as part of its therapeutic effect. The combination was a silent chemical trap. She had no pain, no sharp stabs in the chest, just that growing sense of heaviness and a fatigue that she had mistakenly attributed to the weight of her grief and her 82 years. She had spent months believing she was just fading out of life, preparing herself for an end that was entirely preventable.
When I explained this to her, showing her the jagged lines on her heart tracing and comparing them to a normal rhythm, I saw a spark of the old school teacher return to her eyes. "So I'm not just dying of a broken heart?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of hope and disbelief. I told her that while her grief was real, her physical heart was actually being hindered by her breakfast. We worked on a new plan, switching her comfort food to berries and small portions of apples, fruits that provided the sweetness she craved without the dangerous potassium load. Within 2 weeks, the lead in her chest had vanished. She returned to my office with a touch of pink in her cheeks and a new sense of purpose. Dorothy learned that even in our loneliest moments, our bodies are still fighting for us. And by understanding the quiet needs of our aging organs, we can find the strength to keep the music of our lives playing for many years to come.
The heartbeat is not just a mechanical thud. It is a symphony of ions, sodium, calcium, and potassium, moving in a perfectly timed choreography across the membranes of your heart cells. This is the sodium-potassium pump, the microscopic engine that drives every breath you take and every thought you have. However, as we cross the threshold of our 60s and 70s, this engine begins to experience wear and tear. Research from the University of Tokyo's Department of Cardiovascular Medicine has shown that the cellular membranes of the elderly become more porous and less efficient at maintaining the electrical gradient. This means that even a minor fluctuation in blood mineral levels can cause a major disruption in cardiac rhythm. For a person in their 70s, the heart's electrical system is like an old house with aging wiring. You can't just plug in a dozen high-voltage appliances without blowing a fuse.
In clinical practice, I have seen that the most dangerous arrhythmias are often the silent ones. These are the irregular heartbeats that don't cause a racing sensation, but instead lead to a subtle decrease in cardiac output. When potassium levels rise too high, often due to the consumption of high potassium fruits like bananas, oranges, or kiwis, in combination with common heart medications, the heart muscle becomes hypopolarized. This means the cells are so ready to fire that they begin to fire randomly, or conversely become so saturated that they refuse to fire at all. For a patient on potassium-sparing diuretics or heart failure medications, this is a life-threatening situation. The heart rate can drop to a dangerous level, leading to syncope, sudden fainting, which often results in devastating falls and head injuries for the elderly.
I often tell my medical students that a geriatric patient is like a finely tuned instrument that has been in use for a century. You don't tune it with a hammer, you tune it with a feather. We must approach nutrition with that same level of delicacy. Statistical data from recent clinical trials indicates that over 40% of emergency room visits for unexplained dizziness in seniors can be traced back to electrolyte imbalances exacerbated by diet. This is a staggering number when you consider how many of these patients are then put on even more medications, further complicating the chemical soup in their blood. We are often treating the symptoms of a dietary interaction as if they were the onset of a new disease, leading to a prescribing cascade that can be fatal. The key to protecting this electrical fragility is awareness and moderation. It is about understanding that your recommended daily allowance of certain minerals has changed because your body's ability to regulate them has changed. I want you to feel empowered by this knowledge. When you understand the why behind your heart's behavior, you lose the fear that often accompanies aging. You realize that you are not a victim of your years, but a steward of a complex and beautiful system. By choosing fruits that are lower on the potassium scale and being mindful of your medication's effects, you are essentially upgrading the wiring of your heart. You are giving your cardiac engine the stable environment it needs to keep humming for another decade or more. This is the path to true longevity, not a desperate search for a fountain of youth, but a wise and gentle management of the magnificent vessel you already possess.
Harold Hank Reed was a man who had spent 40 years on the assembly lines of Detroit, his body a map of hard labor and blue-collar pride. At 75, he still wore his company jacket with a sense of identity, but his stride had slowed, and his once powerful hands were now plagued by the prickling needles of diabetic neuropathy. Hank was a fighter. When he was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and hypertension 5 years ago, he vowed to clean up his act. He traded his afternoon candy bar for what he believed was the ultimate health food, a large bag of raisins and dried apricots. He would sit in his recliner watching the Tigers play on TV, mindlessly snacking on these natural treats. Yet during our checkups, his hemoglobin A1C, a 3-month average of blood sugar, remained stubbornly high, and his blood pressure was a constant simmering threat.
He was frustrated, feeling like a failure, and ashamed that he no longer had the stamina to play catch with his grandson in the backyard. I had to sit Hank down and explain the sugar trap of dried fruits. "Hank," I said, "imagine taking a gallon of water and boiling it down until only a cup of syrup remains. The sugar hasn't gone anywhere. It's just more concentrated. When a fruit is dried, the water is removed, but the fructose remains in a dense, potent form that the aging body struggles to process. For a man like Hank, whose arteries were already under the constant pressure of hypertension, these concentrated sugar spikes were like pouring acid onto a wound. Each time he ate a handful of raisins, his blood sugar would skyrocket, causing his blood vessels to inflame and stiffen, a process called glycation. This inflammation acts like a magnet for cholesterol, encouraging the buildup of plaque that narrows the coronary arteries. His healthy snack was actually a silent accelerant for the very heart disease he was trying to avoid. The internal Noitimkua Hank was one of silent defeat. He thought he was doing the right thing, yet his body was betraying him. I explained that for an older adult, the pancreas doesn't produce insulin with the same speed as it once did, and the cells become more resistant to its signal. This means that sugar stays in the bloodstream longer, causing more damage to the delicate lining of the heart and the kidneys. According to research from the American Heart Association, high fructose intake is directly linked to an increase in triglycerides, the sticky fats that further clog the system. Hank's afternoon snack was thickening his blood, making it harder for his heart to pump it through his stiffened Michigan winter cold arteries. He was literally exhausting his heart just to process a handful of dried fruit. We made a pact that day. We replaced the dried fruit with fresh, water-rich alternatives like blueberries and sliced pears, which contain the fiber necessary to slow down sugar absorption. I told him, "Hank, we're not just changing your snack. We're giving your arteries a chance to breathe again." The transformation was slow but profound. Over the next 6 months, his blood sugar stabilized, the inflammation in his legs subsided, and his blood pressure began to respond to his medication for the first time in years. The most emotional moment came when he walked into my office without his cane, a wide grin on his face. He had spent the previous Saturday at the park throwing a ball with his grandson for a full 30 minutes. He had escaped the sugar trap, not through a new pill, but by understanding that at 75, the most natural foods can sometimes be the most deceptive. He regained his pride, his stamina, and most importantly, his place in his grandson's life. Martha Stewart, not the one you see on television, but a gentle 80-year-old quilt maker from Asheville, lived in a house filled with the scent of pine and cedar. She was a woman who found beauty in the small things, in the way a needle pulled thread through fabric to create something warm and lasting. But Martha was tired. She suffered from congestive heart failure, a condition where the heart muscle is too weak to pump blood efficiently, leading to fluid buildup in the lungs and ankles. Her pantry was her sanctuary, stocked with cans of peaches and pears that she had relied on for years because they were soft and easy to eat when her breath was short. She saw them as a safe food, a bit of sweetness that reminded her of her mother's kitchen in the Appalachian foothills. She sat in my office, her ankles swollen to the size of small logs, her breathing labored even while sitting still. She was terrified of becoming a burden to her children, of the day she would have to leave her mountain home for a nursing facility. I spent a long time looking at those cans with her, virtually walking through her pantry. "Martha," I explained, "the danger isn't the peach inside the can, it's the liquid it's swimming in. Most canned fruits are packed in heavy syrup, which is essentially a concentrated solution of high fructose corn syrup. But there's an even more insidious ingredient often hidden as a preservative, sodium. For a patient with heart failure, sodium is the ultimate enemy. It acts like a sponge, pulling water into the bloodstream and increasing the total volume of fluid the heart has to move. Martha's heart was like a weary runner being forced to carry an extra 40-pound backpack with every step. The syrup was causing her blood sugar to spike, leading to vascular inflammation, while the hidden salt was drowning her system in excess fluid. I shared with her the clinical reality. For seniors with heart failure, even a small increase in daily sodium can lead to acute decompensation, a sudden crisis where the lungs fill with fluid requiring emergency hospitalization. Statistical data shows that dietary indiscretion is the leading cause of hospital readmission for heart failure patients over the age of 75. Martha was shocked. She never imagined that a gentle pear could be the reason she couldn't catch her breath. The noitum of Martha was one of profound worry, a fear that her body was simply giving out because it was old. I had to show her that her body was actually incredibly resilient. It was just being overwhelmed by the hidden additives in her pantry. We were going to reclaim her health by stripping away the artificial and returning to the pure. Our solution was simple and inexpensive. We replaced the canned fruit with fresh fruit, or if she needed the softness, fruit canned in its own juice with no added sugar or salt. I taught her how to rinse the fruit under cold water to remove any lingering syrup. Within just 3 weeks, the swelling in Martha's ankles had decreased by 70%. She could wear her favorite shoes again, and she found she could walk to her quilting frame without stopping to rest. The heaviness in her chest began to lift, and the fear of the nursing home started to recede. Martha realized that her heart wasn't done yet. It just needed her to be its advocate in the grocery store. She continued to make her beautiful quilts, each stitch a testament to the fact that with the right knowledge, we can protect our most vital organ from the hidden tolls of a modern pantry and live our lives on our own terms, right where we belong. Eleanor Rigby was a woman of melody and memory, a 84-year-old former church organist in St. Louis who still felt the music in her fingertips even as her mind began to flicker with the early shadows of dementia. She was a tiny woman with silver hair and a spirit that seemed to vibrate with a gentle, fading energy. Every morning after her prayers, she would pour herself a tall glass of orange juice, believing she was drinking pure sunshine and the vitamins her heart so desperately needed. She saw juice as a sophisticated, healthy choice, something a doctor would surely approve of. But Eleanor had been noticing a thumping in her chest, a heavy, irregular beating that made her feel as though her heart were a trapped animal. She was terrified of losing her memories, of her parents, of the hymns she had played for 60 years. And she didn't realize that her morning juice was contributing to the very brain fog and cardiac strain she feared most. I had to explain to Eleanor the fundamental difference between an orange and its juice. Eleanor, I said, nature wrapped that sugar and fiber for a reason. When you strip away the pulp and the skin, you're turning a slow-burning fuel into a high-octane explosion. Without fiber to slow down the absorption, the sugar in her juice was flooding her bloodstream in less than 10 minutes. This caused a massive spike in her blood glucose, forcing her aging pancreas to scramble and her blood vessels to expand rapidly to handle the load. In a woman of 84, whose artery walls had lost their youthful elasticity and were thickened with the years, this demand was a direct physical stress. It was causing microvascular damage, not just in her heart, but in the small vessels of her brain. Recent studies from metabolic researchers in South Korea have demonstrated that liquid fructose is processed differently by the liver than solid food. It triggers a rapid production of triglycerides, which are the primary building blocks of arterial plaque. Eleanor's sunshine in a glass was actually thickening her blood and increasing the inflammation in her coronary arteries. This was likely the cause of her thumping heart, a symptom of atrial premature contractions triggered by the metabolic shock of the sugar spike. For a senior with heart valve issues, as Eleanor had, this extra strain was particularly dangerous, pushing her heart toward exhaustion. She sat in my office, her eyes wide with a mix of confusion and realization, clutching her purse as if it held the secrets to her past. The Noai Tumqua Eleanor was one of a woman clinging to her dignity and her history. I told her, "We're not going to take away your sunshine, Eleanor. We're just going to change its form." We switched her from juice back to the whole fruit. One small orange, eaten slowly, fiber and all. The change was remarkable. Within a month, the thumping in her chest had nearly vanished, and her daughter noted that Eleanor seemed sharper, more present during their afternoon visits. By avoiding the liquid sugar spikes, we were reducing the inflammatory load on her brain and heart. Eleanor continued to play her organ, her music a little steadier, her heart a little quieter. She learned that even at 84, the body is a temple that responds to the right offerings. She wasn't losing her mind or her heart. She was simply learning to nourish them in a way that honored their age and their elegance. Throughout my 3 decades of practice, I have come to a profound realization. The most powerful pharmacy in the world is not the one on the corner with the neon sign. It is the one in your own kitchen. We often look for healing in expensive, complex solutions. Yet the most enduring health is built on the foundation of the simple and the natural. For my patients, the Arthurs, the Dorothys, and the Eleanors of the world, the journey back to a strong heartbeat began when they stopped seeing their food as just fuel and started seeing it as information for their cells. As we age, our bodies require high-quality information free from the noise of processing, concentrated sugars, and chemical additives. The kitchen pharmacy is about returning to the integrity of the whole, to the foods that have been part of the human story for thousands of years. The first rule of this pharmacy is whole, slow, and local. When you choose a fresh apple over a glass of apple juice, you are choosing a slow, steady release of energy that respects your heart's need for stability. When you opt for fresh berries instead of a handful of raisins, you are providing your blood vessels with potent antioxidants without the inflammatory sugar spike. I recommend that my seniors keep a heart-healthy pantry stocked with things like raw walnuts, which are rich in omega-3 fatty acids, and colorful berries like raspberries and blackberries, which are low on the glycemic index and the potassium scale. Instead of canned fruits in syrup, we can poach a fresh pear in water with a dash of cinnamon, a spice that research shows can help improve insulin sensitivity and lower blood pressure. These aren't sacrifices. They are upgrades in flavor and vitality. I often share with my patients that moderation is the ultimate medicine. You don't have to banish every fruit you love. You simply have to understand the timing and the form. For example, if you love a banana, have half of one in the morning and pair it with a protein like Greek yogurt to slow down its impact. If you crave something sweet, a single square of dark chocolate, at least 70% cocoa, can actually improve blood flow and reduce the risk of heart disease, according to clinical trials. The kitchen pharmacy is about empowerment. It's about walking into a grocery store and knowing exactly which items will strengthen your heart and which will strain it. It's about taking control of your health with every bite you take, turning the act of eating into an act of self-care and love. I have seen the before and after in thousands of lives. I have seen men who could barely walk to their mailbox regain the strength to go hiking with their children. I have seen women who were plagued by brain fog and arrhythmias find a new clarity and a steady pulse. The transformation isn't magic. It is the result of aligning our habits with our biology. Your kitchen is the place where you can manufacture your own resilience. By choosing the simple, the fresh, and the whole, you are giving your heart the quiet environment it needs to repair itself and function at its peak. This is the ultimate secret to longevity. It's not about fighting death, but about nourishing life with every tool we have at our disposal. Your heart has worked for you for a lifetime. Now it is time for you to work for it, using the simple, beautiful ingredients that nature has provided in the heart of your home. As we reach the final chapter of this journey, I want you to take a deep, quiet breath and feel the rhythmic pulse in your wrist, that steady, persistent thrumming that has been with you since before you were born. After 30 years and 30,000 patients, I am still in awe of the human heart's capacity for resilience. Whether you are 60, 70, or 85, your heart is not a used-up machine. It is a living, breathing miracle that is constantly trying to find its way back to balance. The stories of Arthur, Dorothy, Hank, Martha, and Eleanor are not just anecdotes. They are mirrors held up to our own lives, showing us that even the most well-intentioned habits can be adjusted to create a more vibrant future. We have seen how the hidden risks in grapefruit, bananas, dried fruits, canned syrups, and juices can strain the aging heart. But more importantly, we have seen that knowledge is the ultimate cure. My advice to you today is simple but urgent. Respect the margin for error. As you age, your body's ability to buffer the shocks of sugar, minerals, and drug interactions decreases. This is the reality of our biology, but it is not a death sentence. It is a call to intentionality. Choose whole over processed. Every time you choose the whole fruit over the juice or the dried version, you are protecting your arteries from inflammation and your heart from the exhaustion of a metabolic spike. Be your own advocate. Take the list of fruits we discussed to your next doctor's appointment. Ask about the potassium-sparing effects of your medication or the CYP3A4 interactions of your diet. Your doctor is your partner, but you are the CEO of your own health. Listen to the whispers. Don't ignore the heaviness, the dizziness, or the thumping in your chest as just old age. These are the whispers of your heart asking for a change in its environment. I want you to act right now. Don't wait for a crisis to change your kitchen. Tomorrow morning, when you reach for your breakfast, choose a heart-healthy alternative. Replace that glass of juice with a whole orange. Trade that canned fruit for a fresh bowl of berries. These small, daily victories are the building blocks of a heart that can last another 20 or 30 years. You have the power to stop the silent damage before it becomes irreversible. You have the power to add years of quality, laughter, and memory to your life. I have seen the hoi sin, the rebirth, of so many patients who simply decided to listen to their hearts, and I know that same rebirth is possible for you. To summarize our path to a stronger heart, avoid grapefruit if you are on any major medications, especially statins or blood pressure drugs. Limit high potassium fruits like bananas if your kidney function is declining or if you take ACE inhibitors. Steer clear of the sugar bombs found in dried fruits and heavy syrups which inflame your arteries. And finally, treat fruit juice as a rare treat rather than a daily habit to avoid the liquid spike that exhausts your cardiovascular system. Instead, embrace the kitchen pharmacy of whole, fresh, fiber-rich fruits that nourish without the noise. Thank you for walking this path with me today. It has been the privilege of my life to serve as a guide for so many beautiful souls on their journey toward health. If you found this information helpful, if you felt a sense of chwalan, healing, and hope in these words, I invite you to join our community. Please subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another heart-to-heart talk made specifically for your stage of life. Share this video with someone you love. You might be the one who saves their heart today. Leave a comment below with a 1 if you've learned something new, or a 0 if you have a question I can answer in a future video. Your feedback is the heartbeat of this channel. Here is to your health, your strength, and your very own new heartbeat. I am Dr. Sanjay Gupta, and I will see you in the next video. Living life on your own terms starts with one wise choice today.